All right, I think we can get started. If people filtering a little late, that's fine. We'll get the slides. So my name is Chris Allen, and I am a behavior analyst at CA Human Services in Richmond, Virginia. This presentation is going to kind of piggyback, as I said, off of the one on Tuesday, but you don't need to have the one on Tuesday, which was the 3-term contingency, antecedent behavior and consequences, to understand this one. So the purpose of this course is to provide an introduction to the 4 functions of behavior, as well as to introduce the concept of functional behavior assessments, and to understand why behavior works and why behavior does not work. We're going to kind of touch on all 3 of these throughout the next half hour, 45 minutes or so. And then there'll be a spot for questions at the end. So kind of my aim is by the end of the course, you will understand the basis for why behavior occurs. And you will be able to improve and extend interventions for individuals with these either maladaptive or kind of interfering behaviors. And then this course will provide a basis for knowledge of behavioral comprehension of treatment plans or different plans that you might come across, as well as establish kind of communication on some of these principles of applied behavior analysis that are used in a multitude of different fields. So we're going to quickly review from Tuesday, and we talked about the ABCs or ABC data, antecedent behavior consequence, and we gave kind of the example of you arrive at work, so you see a coworker at work. Your behavior is saying hello, and that consequence is the hello you receive back, or that attention you receive back. So what's controlling your behavior or that hello is the fact that you're going to get that hello back. And what's signaling, oh, I can say hello, is you seeing that coworker. So when we look at behavior, we want to kind of paint that whole picture of what was it that happened before that kind of helped trigger or give that cue that you can engage in this behavior. And then that consequence, what happens right after that behavior that keeps that behavior happening. And so basically what that does is just kind of helps us answer the question, why do we engage in behavior? And it's a really easy answer if it's not easy to figure out necessarily why we gave it a specific behavior, but just why we engage in behaviors in general is pretty easy, and it's because they work. Behaviors continue to happen because they are working. We don't necessarily always know what they're working to get, but they are getting something. That's why we continue to see them. And we're going to kind of talk about what that is today. So kind of the principles of behavior. All behaviors occur for a reason. We may not always know that reason, but there is a reason there. And they continue to occur because they are effective. And they are effective because they're getting the individual what the individual needs or wants. And those needs are met by accessing a tangible item they want, something physical that they can hold or have, escaping a situation, a feeling, or a thought they don't like, gaining attention from another person, or accessing a sensory feeling that they like. All behavior is governed by these 4 things. And so when we're looking at behavior, we're trying to assess which one of these 4 things, or which combination of these 4 things that individual needs. And then when we try to build new behaviors, which we'll talk about in other presentations, how to build those, we want to make sure that meets the exact same function or exact same needs that they need. So those are our 4 functions, and the first one we're going to talk about is attention. If you're a teacher, the dreaded attention-seeking behavior, or if you're working with anyone, sometimes those behaviors can be the most evident or the most obvious ones, but not always. So what is attention-maintained behavior? Well, we do attention-maintained behavior all the time. And I like to give this example. Say you and a friend are driving down the road. You see some cows in a pasture along the road, and you say, hey, look, there are cows. The person next to you can see the cows. There's no real reason for you to say, hey, look, there are cows. Everyone kind of in the car most likely can see the cows. What you're doing is essentially saying, hey, look, there's cows, to try to get attention from that person. So then they make a comment back, and maybe there's a dialogue that happens. We don't actively cognitively think, hey, I need attention right now. I'm gonna say, hey, look, there's cows. We just naturally do it. We don't always need to know, hey, I'm looking for attention. Instinctively, we just do these behaviors because attention is one of those functions of behavior, and it's a necessity for all humans. So we just kind of put these in throughout our day when we want attention. Same with all kids. They don't necessarily know that they're doing these attention-seeking behaviors. They're just doing behaviors, and it's getting them what they want. So let's say attention-seeking behaviors from adults. So much of kid behavior, especially younger kids, is geared toward adult attention. So let's say a student, Wendy, is sitting in her chair doing her work independently. The teacher is helping another student. Wendy stands up and walks over to the teacher and asks, do we need to complete the entire assignment? Now, maybe she is asking for direction and doesn't quite know if she has to complete the entire assignment, but most likely Wendy knows she has to complete the entire assignment. She maybe should be asking an obvious question to get a little bit of attention. Maybe she was sitting by herself for a long time and that's a way that she knows she gets attention, or just naturally she goes up and seeks that attention by asking kind of an obvious question or some of those repetitive questions we see over time. Those are a lot of times just a way of actually seeking attention, but they're not cognitively thinking, oh, I don't have attention right now. What can I do to get attention? Maybe I'll go do this. These are just behaviors that we do naturally throughout the day, and our kids do naturally throughout the day. As well as gaining attention from peers. So as kids get older, peer attention becomes more reinforcing. Specifically, if you've ever worked with teenagers, they really want not much to do with adults, and they kind of exclusively kind of want that peer attention for the most part. So let's say John, a freshman with great grades, is in class with his friends, and he states, this assignment is stupid. Maybe he thinks the assignment is stupid, maybe he doesn't. He's probably going to do the assignment because he has great grades, and he may even enjoy the assignment. But by stating that out in the open amongst friends, he may get a reaction out of his friends. So that's another way where it's these subtle ways that people ask for attention and seek it out throughout their day. Now, these examples are kind of simple ways to get attention that happen in our everyday life. They're not necessarily maladaptive, or they're not necessarily interfering. They're just kind of examples on how people throughout the day kind of seek attention in some of these more appropriate ways. So that dreaded negative attention. So in the minds of most kids and even some adults, all attention is equal. There is no negative attention, there's really just attention. So let's say a teacher is sitting in class with about 10 students, or if you're at home with a couple kids, one of the students is crying and the teacher begins to console them. Another peer begins to dump out toys and make a mess. The teacher immediately goes over to scold the kid. So that kid understands, hey, that kid's getting attention. If I want attention, I can make this little mess. Teacher or mom or grandma or someone comes over and gives me attention. Those are really easy ways to identify when there's attention, but they're really hard because they happen so naturally in the environment to recognize a lot of the times. So we want to be cognizant of when we're starting to see some of these negative attention behaviors creep up, because that's where we want to put in a positive way to get attention, because they're asking, saying, hey, I need attention right now. Because there is really no such thing as attention. That's just them asking for attention, and they know if they do something negative, it gets attention a lot more often than something positive. We miss positive things all the time. We rarely miss a chance to scold or kind of work with a kid that's doing something they're not supposed to be doing. So let's have an example. So Samuel has been going to an ABA therapy clinic, or any clinic, or any school for that matter, really. And he really does not like many of the teachers except one, Miss Tanisha. She understands Samuel and how to keep him calm and happy. So Miss Tanisha has been trying to train the other staff to help Samuel. Sometimes when Samuel is struggling, Miss Tanisha will jump in to help out, even if she is not working with him. So now when Samuel sees Miss Tanisha, he acts upset and frustrated, and Miss Tanisha comes over to help him work through it. So what behavior is being strengthened by Miss Tanisha's attention? She's giving attention to Samuel, and she's just trying to help. There is everyone who kind of works in this field wants to help, and we look to help. And this is a common example I see in a lot of fields, whether you're an ABA, which has some of these or these understandings of these three-term contingencies and these functions of behavior, or in other fields. This is a very common thing. So let's kind of work through it. So here's our form from from Tuesday. If you haven't seen it before, that's fine. We're going to walk through it right now. So our antecedent, or the thing that's signaling or triggering that behavior, is Miss Tanisha's in the room. So when Miss Tanisha's in the room, that signals to Samuel, oh, I can get attention from her. And he has learned that he can act upset or frustrated. Now, if we were doing it in a more functional manner, we'd probably identify what that looks like a little bit more and give a little better definition of what upset and frustrated is. But for this example, we're just going to kind of use a general upset and frustrated. So Miss Tanisha's in the room. That's signaling, oh, I can act upset or frustrated, and I can get attention from Miss Tanisha. In this case, because every time he acts upset, he gets attention, we can hypothesize that the function of him acting upset or frustrated is attention. And we'll look at desired alternative behaviors a little bit later and how to build those in. So the second function, or there's no real order, I just kind of picked this order. We're going to go tangible next. So what is tangible maintained behavior? Well, many times we want a specific item or specific items. And these tangible items can include food, toys, computer time, turn at a game. iPads are huge right now for a lot of kids, but it can be a variety of things. And so we'll give a quick example of, let's say a child goes up to his sibling at home and pushes them, and as a result gets the toy car. So the child may learn that pushing others will result in gaining access to a toy car. That's a very common and age-appropriate example for children, is to use their behavior to kind of get them what they want. Behaviors, as we know, are just a ways to communicate. And so a lot of times that behavior is just a communication way, a way that the individual is communicating their wants and needs. And in this case, that child wanted that toy car. So let's give a little deeper into example. So let's say Sasha is in a classroom with several other students. When the teacher is preparing work for her, she's allowed to put together a puzzle that she loves. One day, as her teacher is getting ready and Sasha spills a pitcher of water on the floor. Her teacher gives her the puzzle to do while the water is being cleaned up. The next day, when it's time for work, Sasha spills some paint on the floor. So in this case, we're going to go through our behavior description practice again. And so our antecedent is our teacher is getting ready. So there's some cues that our teacher is getting ready. There's things happening. Our behavior, we saw Sasha spilling water or Sasha spilling paint. So that's our target behavior, what we're looking at. And what she got when she did that is she got access to a puzzle. So our hypothesized function, now, no, there could be other functions at play, and you'd want to test this, and we'll talk about how to test some of these hypotheses later in the presentation. But our hypothesis here might be it's tangible. She wanted to get access to the puzzle, and she knew by spilling water, the teacher will give her access to the puzzle while it's cleaned up. And escape. So what is escape maintained behavior? Well, we all have things we do not like. Many times we try to either avoid them or escape them altogether. So escape maintained behavior usually has a prior learned history. You have to know you don't like something, but not always. So when Sarah is asked to do math problems, she gets very frustrated and has a lot of trouble with them. Every time Sarah is told to do her math work, she asks to go to the bathroom. Asking to go to the bathroom is a great escape maintained behavior for a lot of people and a lot of kids. I mean, people do that at work all the time, take long bathroom breaks, things like that. Bathroom is kind of that one thing that a lot of people know will be honored more often than not. So that can be a behavior. Asking to go to the bathroom can be a behavior that people use to kind of get out of things that they don't like. And it doesn't always have to be a behavior they don't like. We can escape thoughts we don't like, and we can escape emotions we don't like. So those feelings as well, we can have escape maintain behavior from some of those thoughts and feelings. So an example. So Cam is told to brush his teeth before he is allowed to play with his toys. Cam's mom left the room and tells his brother to watch him. Today, he put away his backpack and went and started playing with his toys. Cam's mom came back. She asked him if he had brushed his teeth. He said yes. So let's break this one down. So the antecedent was mom left the room. So that's triggering our behavior, or triggering the access to our behavior, that this behavior is available to work. So when mom came back, Cam told mom he brushed his teeth, or he lied to her. The consequence was Cam escaped or did not have to brush his teeth. So we can hypothesize or guess that the function of that lying behavior is escape. And so that desired alternative, we'll come back to that and figure out what we want to happen instead of that behavior. And those trainings next week on Tuesday and Thursday, we'll talk a little bit more about how to build those desired alternatives in there. And the last one, sensory. So far we've talked about attention, tangible, escape, and the last one we're going to talk about for the 4 functions of behavior is that sensory component. So sensory. We have 5 senses, and throughout our day we encounter things that we enjoy through these senses. This can also be called automatic reinforcement. So when Sylvia is getting frustrated with her noisy environment at school, she'll often rock back and forth in the chair. Sylvia also enjoys rocking on couches and in the car, even if it isn't noisy. Rocking is a very common thing. We do it all day. People love swivel chairs. People love rocking chairs. Our kids, whether they have special needs or not, need sensory input. And rocking can be a huge one. So it looks like Sylvia in this case, while she'll rock when it's noisy at school, she'll do it many other times throughout the day, even if it isn't noisy. So we can kind of guess that she just enjoys the rocking. Maybe she enjoys it while there's some noise and any other time. So let's give a little bit more of an example. So Harry is a verbal kid who likes school and his family. So he's doing well in school and spends most of his leisure time hanging out with friends or with family at home. When Harry's allowed to, he will stare at lights and windows. Many times he'll move his fingers back and forth, light filtering. This behavior occurs during class, when he's doing his work. It occurs when he is playing with his toys, and it occurs when he's playing with his friends and family. That's a very common behavior with a lot of our kids. Is kind of that sensory input is light filtering or looking at lights. That's a common behavior amongst people as well. Amongst all people, we enjoy some of those light shows, things like that. And so one kind of question to always ask ourselves when we're looking at sensory behavior is the behavior of light filtering positively or negatively affecting Harry, or not at all? When we're looking at sensory behavior, we want to make sure that it's directly affecting Harry. If we think it looks weird, if it doesn't affect him, it doesn't really matter. People are allowed to be weird if they want to. So we want to make sure when we're looking at sensory behavior, we're really looking at, is it adversely affecting him? So we can break down this one, because there's no clear antecedent or lots of different possible antecedents. So it's happening all the time. There's nothing clear, or we're seeing it a lot of different antecedents when we kind of collect that data. The behavior is light filtering with his fingers, and that consequence is just getting access to that behavior. He's able to do that behavior. And if it's happening at all time with no real clear antecedents, we can kind of hypothesize that it's a sensory component, and there's something he's getting out of it that's sensory. And if we want a desired alternative behavior, in this case, unless it's affecting him, maybe Harry says he really wants to make friends, and some friends struggle with hanging out with him if he's doing that. maybe we could talk to Harry and say when we're around friends, we might not want to do that because friends don't really like that, or look at how we can kind of appropriately shape that to where there's a time and a place for it. But if it's not negatively affecting him, we might not have a desired alternative behavior. We might just leave it in, let them be able to do it. So we want to make sure, specifically with sensory behaviors, that we're only kind of looking at changing them or looking at an alternative if it's negatively affecting that person's life. So how do we use all of this information to kind of do a functional behavior assessment, or an FBA? Those are done in lots of different environments. Lots of different practitioners can do them. And there's a couple different ways that can be done. They're done in schools, they're done in clinics, they're done in hospitals, they're done kind of all over. And there's kind of really 4 different components, or different ways you can do a functional behavior assessment. That first one is an indirect one, where you're just interviewing. You just do interviews, and there's some structured interviews and some standardized interviews like the MASS or the FAST or some that you might have heard of. The second one is direct without environmental manipulation. So you interview, and then you go and you do observations and collect that antecedent behavior and consequence data. But you're just observing and you're just interviewing. You're not changing or manipulating at anything at all. And then there's something called a structural analysis, where you do interviews, you do observations, some structured observations, and then you kind of alter the environment to see if their behavior changes based on your hypothesis from your interview and your observations. And then the last one, which is the most stringent, is called experimental analysis or functional analysis, where you kind of set up and control all the conditions. Usually, a lot of times those are kind of done in a room without much in there, and you can control most of not all environmental arrangements. So that indirect is the simplest way, but it's not always the most accurate. And it consists of interview questions, usually by a qualified individual, or just kind of a piece of paper if you want, that ask questions that will inform about the behavior's function. And there's some common ones. There's a bunch out there on how to conduct these interviews. So that's the common one, or that's the most easiest. It's really short, but it's not always the most accurate, because a lot of times you're asking questions and they don't quite know. You're not observing the behavior directly. And then the next one is direct without environmental manipulation. So you're not testing your hypothesis. You're using interviews from caregivers and other people, as well as observational data through that antecedent, that behavior, and that consequence data to form a hypothesis. And then you build an intervention based off of that hypothesis. You don't test the hypothesis. We're just observing and interviewing. This one's kind of commonly done in schools and things where you don't need as much information, or there's not as much need to really test the hypothesis before you build an intervention. You can put an intervention in pretty quickly with these. And then the third one is that structural analysis. That's where you're both collecting data through observations and you build a hypothesis, and then you actively test that hypothesis in the environment. You do that by changing some antecedents. So withholding a toy to see if the behavior occurs kind of in the environment. You're kind of ignoring the child to see if behavior occurs to get more attention. You're giving lots of hard tasks or demands to see if that behavior, they use their behavior to try to escape them. And if you're seeing it during all of these, you may kind of hypothesize that it's sensory. So you're doing these small little manipulations of the environment to see if that behavior occurs. And you don't want to do this if they're really dangerous behaviors, because you don't want to see that behavior. Or you can, if there's some precursors of behavior, you can tell that behavior is going to start, then you can give them attention, or you can give them that toy. You don't have to wait till that full-on behavior happens to just know that, hey, I tested this hypothesis. We have a little bit of data that says this is what it was. It was attention, or it was a tangible. And then the last one, which is the most intensive and most intrusive, it's conducted in a closed environment, and all the conditions are meticulously controlled. And you alternate between giving access to attention, escape, and tangible. The one downside of this is it briefly reinforces that maladaptive or interfering behavior to see if you can stop the behavior. So once the behavior starts, if I give attention, will attention stop the behavior? And so you're testing to see whether giving access to the function of our hypothesis stops that behavior. And you're testing all of them, not just your hypothesis. You're testing all three: attention, escape, and tangible. And then if it's occurring during all of those, we can hypothesize it's sensory. So this one's usually not done all that often unless you're in kind of an ABA clinic. So that's what we're going to go over today. I have a couple, I have one last thing we're going to hypothesize and how to create that hypothesis and how to test that hypothesis. So we're going to diagram out this example. So Johnny is a 7-year-old boy who can talk in short 2 to 3 word sentences. Johnny has been playing with his toys since he got home from school. When it is dinner time, Johnny is instructed to come sit at the table. When he is given the instruction, Johnny drops to the floor and begins to scream and yell, "No table." So, what's the antecedent in this situation? Well, what's the behavior? The behavior we can see is dropping and screaming, "No table." So what was that antecedent or the thing that triggered that behavior? When he was told to come sit at the table. So he was instructed to sit at the table. That antecedent triggered that behavior. The consequence of his behavior in this case is not sitting at the table. If he's on the ground screaming and kicking, he's not sitting at the table. So the consequence is he effectively removed the table. So when we're hypothesizing a function, here it could be kind of escape or tangible. We don't know because he was playing with his toy. We don't know if he wants to continue playing with his toy or he doesn't want to sit at the table. So we have a hypothesized function of one of these two. And maybe in this case, when we're looking at, okay, what do we want him to do instead? So when we're told to come to the table, what we really want him to do is either start bargaining, like say, hey, can I have 2 more minutes? Or 2 more minutes, please? Or just get up and come to the table. So those are kind of our desired alternatives, is that bargaining or just compliance. So let's test that hypothesis. So Johnny is a 7-year-old boy. He could talk in short 2 to 3 word sentences. When it is dinner time, Johnny is instructed to bring your toy and come to the table. So this time we added bring your toy. So we're testing to see if it's escape maintained. So when he's given the instruction, Johnny grabs his toy and comes sits at the table. So our antecedent, this time we added bring your toy and come sit at the table. He walked to the table with his toy. The consequence was he got to continue playing with his toy. So we can hypothesize that the function in this case was tangible. He didn't really care about the table, but he wanted to play with the toy. Now maybe he still can't bring the toy to the table, but we want to test it first before we put an intervention in place. So that way, when we look at that desired alternative or walking the table and leaving the toys for later, we can build that in. But to test that, maybe we want to kind of reinforce that not as appropriate a behavior of bringing your toys to the dinner table or bringing your toys to the table, just to see if that was in fact the function. If he still would have stopped and screamed, we probably would have hypothesized it was escape and it was coming to the table that he didn't want. But in this case, we told him to bring your toy and come sit at the table. He got up, walked to the table, sat down with his toy. We can hypothesize that it's a tangible. So when we start to build that desired alternative behavior, we want to make sure we're including that access to the tangible in that desired alternative. And we'll kind of we'll get to next week how we actively build these desired alternatives and how we start to support plan and use this to build a complete kind of intervention plan. So, any questions on functions of behavior? And if you come up with questions and you always feel free to email me. These slides will be sent out, so you'll have access to them. And if you have any other questions or needs or wants about the 3-term contingency, which was from last week or last Tuesday, or this one, feel free to shoot me an email. and I will reach out with as much information as I can. All right, well, that's it for this presentation. We'll be doing another one on next Tuesday on lowering behavior and how to effectively reduce behavior. And then that next Thursday will be on how to kind of put it all together and how to support plan and how to build a kind of a full support plan using kind of all of these. So next week is Tuesday is behavior reduction, and next week, Thursday, is replacement behavior, how to lower behavior on Tuesday and how to build a replacement behavior behind it on Thursday. And then we'll put that all together for that replacement behavior and build a full support plan.